Hi, everyone. I am very honored to have someone in the podcast that is taking Miami by storm. She is doing amazing things in the real estate space, and I'm very happy to have you here. Alyssa, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Why don't you tell us your background story? I think it's incredible how you came from New York now to Miami, but I want to hear it from you.
Sure. So I started my career actually in the fashion industry in Manhattan over 10 years ago, and I worked in the industry for several years and then realized about 6 years into it that I think I wanted to change. At that time, the fashion industry was disrupted a lot by the recession, and I was just looking for other opportunities to grow and to really further my career and make an impact. And so I said, what would I do if it was not fashion? And the first thing that came to mind was commercial real estate. And I had the privilege of being provided an opportunity to work as an executive assistant for an owner's rep company. At that time, it was called Lair LLC, now called the Coming Group. So it was an owner's rep company that provided project management and cost management to several prolific development projects in and around Manhattan. And I learned as an assistant and then slowly worked my way into the sales part of the industry. And I did that for about almost a year before COVID hit. And in March 2020, we all got that work from home email. I think it was Friday the 13th, March 2020. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go down to Boca Raton, Florida, just for a weekend and get out of the cold New York while this COVID thing rides out. And it turned out that it never really rode out for several years, and I ended up staying in South Florida. In that time, while I was living in Boca, I had worked remotely for a Coming Group and was starting to, develop some relationships with large-scale developers and general contractors in the market, but also saw a trend with New York and California people coming to South Florida because South Florida was open for business, and so a lot of the capital was coming down to the area. So I decided to stay, and I left my firm and I joined a commercial real estate recruiter that focused on executive level search. So again, working on the business development side and generating leads for this recruitment company that specialized in C-level executive searches for developers and large private equity companies that had a commercial real estate portfolio. And then just by going to a ton of events down here in South Florida was really how I was able to build that book of business. And last year, I joined the company that I'm at now. They actually reached out to me, which is called the Baldwin Group. And the Baldwin Group is the 18th largest insurance and surety brokerage. I work for the dedicated construction and real estate practice, and I help oversee Florida sales growth for the team. So that's just a quick overview of my story and how I came, from New York down here to South Florida.
Sounds amazing. I want to ask you a few things. Specifically, you said, what if I didn't do fashion? What would I do? What happened there? Is there like a story behind that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of people say you went from high heels to kind of work boots, right? Like, how did that happen? Like, what was the synergy? And it's really funny when you take a step back out of the two industries. There are a lot of parallels between fashion and commercial real estate. Number one, building something, right? In fashion, you are building a brand, you are building clothing, you're building something that is used for an everyday user. Same goes with commercial real estate development. You are building things that people live in, work in every day. The second factor is aesthetics. A large part of commercial real estate revolves around interior design, architecture, look, shape, feel, emotion. That also parlays into fashion. And then finally, the third reason is team building. It really takes a village to build both a fashion brand and also a large scale construction project. So those were really the parallels that I saw between fashion and real estate.
And going a little bit deeper into why do you think you do what you do?
I think the biggest reward when it comes to working in this industry is that the people, again, everyone is really brilliant. They're all in it, for the greater good of the community. They want to make an impact on the city. It's always a challenge. It's not an easy task to build a large building. And so I love things that are challenging and also helped me to grow personal development. And every day you're learning something new. So I think also like the learning component of it, and every day is a different day. You're always learning something. There's so much innovation behind it. So it really keeps you on your toes. And I love that.
For sure. I can definitely relate into loving a good challenge. And how do you feel that things have changed from when you first got to South Florida to now?
It's actually funny. So, a little sidebar, I went to college at the University of Miami. I attended school from 2005 to 2009, and it was a very different city at that point. It was really just South Beach, it was really just hospitality and hotels. That was pretty much it in terms of if you wanted to have a career down here. Now, I mean, it is a major hub. It's always been an international city, but just the landscape alone and the skyline of Miami has transformed tremendously. In the past even 4 years, the skyline of Brick Hill City Center, downtown Miami, even Edgewater, and we're even starting to see other parts like Alapatsa, places that you would never even think would be prime location for real estate development are almost saturated in the market in a good way. It's creating a lot of competition, a lot of need for innovation, and problem solving. So, I think it's expanded not just, it's expanded beyond a party town or a place you go for vacation. Ken Griffin is down here, Jeff Bezos, you have the financial hubs, you have the banks, you have technology in addition to real estate that have sort of all converged down here.
I can definitely tell that you like it down here. I do too. I'm actually in Miami as well. I've seen, and I agree with you, there's a huge change from the party, vacation, home vibe to now being extremely cosmopolitan. And every week, it seems like they're throwing or launching a new project that defies gravity. Uh, I just, I was looking at for instance, the Dolce & Gabbana building. It's 90 stories high, and the next one is always like the highest, the highest, the highest, the highest. And you're like, how awesome is this going to be?
Right.
But at the same time, what worries you about such growth as from the commercial real estate perspective?
Yeah. So a lot of the developers and, people in the commercial real estate industry down here, we do talk about this often, so it's not something that is not addressed in our meetings, in our conferences, on our panels. I think the need for sustainability in terms of other businesses that help drive people or allow them to live down here. So for example, healthcare, right? Like, is there enough healthcare to support all the people moving down here? Schooling is another big problem. The availability for public schools, even private school placement for children. So, it is top of mind for people, but, it's speed to market, right? I had an event last night and we talked about speed to market. We do have a lot of multifamily buildings going up here, large luxury residential condos, but there definitely is a need for healthcare, schooling, and also transportation, just road systems. So it is in place. There are plans to do this. It's just the pace in which these projects will be built in support of these large condo buildings.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. The city does have, no city is perfect. And I feel that when people pick on Miami, I'm a little like sensitive because I think no city is perfect. And yes, Miami has its problems, but it is having a renaissance and the boom that's you can definitely feel it. Let's go more towards your personal side. How do you feel going from one city to another, relocating, maybe starting fresh? You said that you did your college years here, but how do you feel that what tips could you give to people that want to do those type of transitions and then thrive in the next place? Like have a softer launch. You probably went into a rising market,
Yeah.
but definitely a rising market doesn't guarantee success. So what tips and tricks can you give them?
I definitely would say get involved as much as you can in like-minded industry organizations, excuse me. So, for example, if you are in commercial real estate, there's a ton of amazing organizations that are open arm and welcome people who are newer to the city. ULI, BizNow, Profile Miami. These are great organizations, NAOP, that bring together people that might not be from Miami or also from Miami together to for introductions and networking. So I think networking events are incredible. I'm sure there are ones out there as well for tech and for finance. There are a ton of conferences that happen down here, especially because the weather is great all year round. It's oftentimes there's many people from out of state that are coming to these conferences and networking with one another. So I really, do encourage in-person meeting. And even in Miami, I'm from New York, but I do think that the social scene here in Florida really is parallel with the industry scene here. So in some places in New York, it might be, I'm just saying New York, for example, because I'm from there, but when you go out to restaurants or you go out to lounges here in Miami, more often than not, you'll meet someone that's a big developer or, works at a big financial firm because it is a very social scene here. So it's easier. And so I would say don't get discouraged by not being able to meet people because I feel like this is definitely a place where there's a lot of stones to overturn and people are really open arms with meeting new people.
I agree with you. I think that there's less like closed doors, perhaps comparing it again to New York or perhaps going to the West Coast to like LA. Most of the important people and people of the industry are behind closed doors or in like high rises that it's harder to interact. Or if they're sitting next to you in the subway, you will never know. It's like it's such a hard thing. Whereas in Miami, people are a little bit more open because a lot of people are transplanted and
Right.
they're like open to network and talking to people. So I've definitely experienced the same thing.
Yeah, we've all had the same experience. I would say like 75% of the people now in Miami are not from Miami. So everyone's kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, and that makes you open to
Hmm.
networking, to meet people, and then to be a little bit more. Perhaps the question is to build our own community, which is part of when you just move to somewhere. You think
Yeah.
I need to open myself. I can't just be in my circle because I don't have one.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot of also other professional of like organizations as well here in Miami that people here know that there are transplants here. So there's like run clubs and like fit classes and like other outside like rollerblading groups that are like fun organizations. Miami's a very outdoorsy place. So it's easy and it's free to meet people. South Point, people come together, they do sunset yoga. There's so many outdoor activities that don't require, a large investment in order to get a group of people together.
Yeah, great and great tips for people to get out there. What
Yeah.
can you tell me about your experience though? Day zero, were you nervous? Were you because you didn't start where you are now? How
Yeah.
did you feel then?
Yeah, sure. Realistically, you are in a new place. Doing business down here is different than doing business in other cities. It's a little bit more laid back in terms of like the business how do I like the business drive into conversation. So like for example, when you're in New York, you sit down with someone new and like you immediately jump into business. Here in South Florida, you have to get used to the culture shift of talking about, maybe your hobbies first, your family, summer vacation. So culturally, it's a little bit different. That's one thing I'd say, I was a little bit challenging at first, or maybe I wasn't aware that I had to become more aware of. So that's a difference. Not that that's, again, anything of an impossible task, but there are definitely some cultural differences, and relationships are everything down here. So it's not as much a transactional city in terms of business. Definitely, it's a slower speed game. I think people just want to build trust and know that they can work with someone that is sort of like minded. So that I would say would be the biggest challenge when I first came down compared to now. But like I said, I never really felt intimidated to meet people down here. It's just a little bit of a different vibe. People are really friendly.
For sure. And agree again. What about if someone wants to go into the commercial real estate space other than networking and preparation? What let's go to like mistakes people are making. People in your industry that you think, oh, they're starting out, but they're not doing the right thing. What can you recommend them?
Yeah, I definitely would say that the one thing, is kind of like a catch-22 about Miami being so social is that you can go out and go to events and parties for weeks, years at a time. But I do think there is something to be said about, doing all those things, which is great, but also follow up in organization and due diligence on your prospects. So, if you are, I think everyone in some capacity is in sales. And I think it's really important to understand clients who you're working with, understand their background, their portfolio, what their goals are, maybe what their pain points are. I think organization and follow up is something that's really crucial that maybe not everyone does, especially when you're in a sales capacity here. I think people can get a little bit lost in the glitz and the glamour, but it's always important to kind of, make sure that you're grounded.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. I think that's definitely something that could happen. Like you get caught up in like I am networking, I am going out, but that follow up is a great maybe faux pas that many people do if you're lax at, like you were mentioning, that culture shock. At first you talk about their family, about hobbies, favorite restaurants, whatever it is, and then but you never get to business or you never actually follow up, you won't get anywhere. Can you tell
Right.
us a story of maybe like a big win that you felt like this made me feel successful?
Yeah. So recently, and it happens. It doesn't happen overnight. That's the other thing. It takes years
For sure.
to achieve something that might have even be a small goal for you. But I think through the industry. So there's a few things. Certainly, when I was on the recruitment side of things, I was, full force. I was new to the industry and was able to win several different contracts with huge developers down here whose names I can't name because I signed NDAs, but we did several staffing roles for them. And it was just like one after another, after another, after another. That was like 2 years ago. That's really the pivotal moment when I was like, okay, all of the hard work I've done for the past 3 years down here have really paid off. And now you're starting to see opportunities come in the door. The second was recently. So the company I work for now is more of a boutique shop compared to some of the other huge international firms. More boutique to Florida, I would say. So we were newer to the Florida market at that time. We, through relationship building, contacts, follow up. It was a ton of follow up with this one pursuit. We were actually, able to get on to a bid list for a huge portfolio down here in Florida. So that, we were kind of like the underdog. We never thought it would even be possible to be considered in the running with some of the top firms that we were competing with. But we were part of that pool. And just that alone, because of follow up, because of network, because of knowing what was going on the right time, I had reached out to the decision maker and I was like, hey, just wanted to touch base. Like, how are things going? Like, I know it's been a couple of weeks. And they were like, actually, you pinged us at the right time. Here's this opportunity. We would love for you to be considered as a candidate for the opportunity. And so we did, and we submitted, a response, and we'll see. We don't, that was just part of that was just getting over the hurdle, which was a huge hurdle for us. And I think also with that and other initiatives that we've been doing down here, our name has really gotten out there where people have come to us now and they're like, we've heard of your company. We know who you guys are. And that, when your name is spoken amongst big decision makers and competitors in your market, it's that's a victory in and of itself.
For sure. I agree that I help entrepreneurs invest and I help them find top quality investments in the commercial real estate space. And 100% agree that relationships is 95% of the deal. Everybody has good deals. Everybody has pipeline. Everybody has something. And no one is going to ever go to you and say, hey, I have a bad deal. You have to be able to discern this and filter and curate which deals are good for you at that time. And when investors come to you, they it usually comes from word of mouth. So I completely agree with you.
Right.
But going in those lines, what is your investment philosophy? What do you believe in with money and what's on your horizon?
Sure. Well, I'm not a private wealth advisor, so I can't give everyone, too
I
much.
want to know more what you think, like your point of view.
Totally, totally. No, I do think the commercial real estate industry down here is a great investment. Obviously, it has to make sense for you. I think it's a long game. For me, buying a home is certainly something that's on the horizon, but I'm also very interested in, investing in commercial projects that are 10, 20 years of, building capital and developing, more of an investment opportunity. I think that's where my mind is right now. I think some people are very attracted to the quick flip and a quick, ROI. But I always think that parking your money for longer periods of time, if you can, is a bigger and better investment.
That's super interesting because you mentioned something about how people are wanting to have quick successes or instant gratification, which is something predominant in our society. I wouldn't say generation, it's society wise. We want instant gratification. And you come with a very refreshing, different point of view of investing, which is the longer it is, the better.
Mm.
Is that because of what you've seen in your industry, or where did that long term thinking come from?
Yeah, it's definitely from being on the development side for sure. Usually a development project on average takes at least 3 years. It could take up to 7 to 8 years to finish a capital project, and I've seen the returns on that versus a smaller single family deal. So yeah, definitely from my experience working with developers, working with investors, that's and personal growth. Again, I didn't develop my career overnight. I didn't have the successes happen, overnight. It's taken me almost 8 years now in this industry to finally see the rewards of all the hard work that I've done.
And this is something that I love that answer because it's something recurring in every podcast I do, in every interview I do. It's most people will say, uh, don't chase the quick win. It takes time, and once you put in the work, you put in the time, the reward is a lot bigger. And it applies to finances, like we're talking now. But now I liked it how you tied it with your career, that it's you can't go anywhere and expect, even if it's a rising tide, even if you have the booming market, it doesn't make you successful overnight. And it kind of reminds me of that quote of an overnight success takes 10 years.
Yes, yes. And the other thing too, I would just add to that it's important to note the small milestones or small achievements. Like I think it's really important to celebrate that because if you're not seeing those small successes that lead up to the big success, then it's important to note that because something's not clicking. So, in other words, if you feel like you're in a rut and you're like on the hamster wheel and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and nothing is really coming back in a positive way, I think it's really important to take a minute and take a step back and just be like, let me pivot here. Let me see what I'm doing, what's working, maybe what I'm doing that's not working, and how do I change that? And I think that is the key to like sustainability, like sustaining the success, if that makes sense.
For sure. And it's sort of like the marathon is long, but if you say I'm going to just focus on this kilometer or the next kilometer, it
Yeah.
makes it easier to handle. And I think it's very valuable when you have a long-term plan, a long-term investment, or being able to develop your career to, yes, have that milestone. And you mentioned like celebrating those milestones to make it a little bit more, I guess doable is the
Right.
word.
Yep. Doable and yeah, and building confidence.
Doable, building confidence. And
Yeah.
also I would say that also it's like it's sort of like a GPS, like I am on the right track. When
Exactly.
you hit the milestones in the right way, you kind of know that your progression is towards your goal. If you
Yes.
don't have that, you might be saying, today I I have this huge win, and then you have to really think, but that's in a different direction than I wanted to. Is that,
Right.
it's
Yeah,
like
it's like
it,
a little bit of reassurance.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge of your day-to-day work?
Time management really is the most challenging. I think
Why
most
would
people say that too. I think a lot of business people and also entrepreneurs say time management.
Why would you think that most people would say that?
I mean, there's just so much going on at one time, right? Like, there's so many components to your job, and there's so many components to driving yourself to success, and then life and all these things. So I think it's really, I mean, I live by my calendar. My calendar is like the first thing I look at when I wake up. Like, I can memorize it, I know exactly time slot, but that's definitely the most challenging things, because you also want to be flexible enough, because if an opportunity does arise or a client does want to meet, you want to make sure you're there. So it's like balancing all the things you need to do in a day, but also giving you some time to be creative and flexible.
Interesting. And I like your answer, but then I got something that I want to ask more. Like, what do you feel, what habits do you have, do you feel make you more successful?
Organization, like I write everything down, I keep everything on a calendar. I block out my calendar. It's very disciplined. I'm a very disciplined person. At least I've learned to be. Between my meetings, I organize certain meetings on certain days based on where they're located. If you're someone like me that your car is your office, I make sure that I'm not driving to Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Boca, like in one day. Make sure it's organized. So, okay, if I'm in one place for a certain meeting, I try to like tack on 2 to 3 other meetings or people I want to get in front of while I'm there. The other thing too is for events. I go to so many events. It's really important to not, overschedule yourself for events, but also be organized so that way you're taking the most advantage from those events for the ones that you're going to. For example, before any event I attend, I do a ton of due diligence. I look at who the panelists are. I look at the attendee list. If there's anyone on those lists that I want to target because they have active projects, I make sure I reach out to them before, send them a note, introduce myself, set up a time slot to meet at the conference. So everything is really organized, and then follow up. I'm following up immediately the day before. So I block off some time to send emails for an hour to 2 hours after the conferences. So everything goes in the calendar. It's literally my virtual assistant. I would say that organization and time management is really the most important tools.
Where did you learn this, or how did you come to the system?
I actually think it was from the fashion industry and being an assistant in the fashion industry. It was very demanding. The times, the meetings, needing things now, needing things yesterday. In order for you to survive that industry, you had to be 3 steps ahead. So honestly, I learned to multitask. I learned organization. I learned calendar management, all from a fast-paced industry of fashion.
That I love it. Very, very interesting. And I agree. I think if you don't plan, you will fail to do it. Like it doesn't work. And I think on my side, I try to say no to more things than I say yes. And that way I get more free time, because when I know that I'm 100% full, I can't think. If my calendar is every hour is blocked, to me it's
Mm-hmm.
not a successful day. I feel like it's not success, even though to somebody else it might be like, whoa, you're crushing with meeting after
Yeah,
meeting, but at the same time you're like, actually I didn't do any work yet.
yeah.
I
I think
wasn't sovereign.
I think it also depends on where you are in your career. Like
For
if
sure.
you're at level, I would say go to as many things as possible. Learn as much, like be a sponge. Absorb as much, go to as many things. When you're younger, you have, the legs to do so. As you get older, you get a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more focused. You home in on the events and the relationships that are most, are your priority. So I also think it depends on where you are in your career. At first I was going to every event, like meeting as many people as possible, just throwing myself in there. Now I'm like, okay, I did all of those things. Now it's important, like you said, to really prioritize the conversations that are mutually beneficial for either parties on each side of the call. Because the other thing too is, as you get older, you don't want to waste other people's time, right? If it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
You always want to make sure that you're adding value, but I think when you're younger, people understand that you're young and you can't really provide that much value in the beginning. You're just there to learn as much as possible.
Yeah. To take.
Yep.
What's next on your in your horizon? Where do you want to get to? You went from fashion to now commercial real estate.
Yeah.
What's your next step?
I mean, for me, I just want to take my company, the Baldwin Group, and our team to like the highest point of where we can go right now. Like I said, we are an existing company, but we're really, really bullish on Florida. And my goal over the next several years is to make us the top insurance brokerage for developers and general contractors and private equity companies here in our market. So,
Love the ambition.
yeah,
Amazing.
thank you.
I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. I love to finish the podcast by asking you what inspires you in the work you do today.
I think seeing people inspired by what I do keeps me motivated. I think helping others is really why I do what I do. I think everyone always, success, yes, financial success is important, but I think the most rewarding thing is helping other people. And truly, it inspires me. When people reach out to me and they say, what you're doing is so incredible. How do you do it? How can I learn from you? Then that's when I know I've succeeded. Really, it's the people.
Fantastic. Definitely inspired me, learned from you, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
It was.
I enjoyed
Thank you
it.
again.
Thank you. Bye.